on the cloud. And we're going to start sharing screen. Screen one. Forms, that's what we'll do. Share. All right, so we are sharing my forms, right? You guys are seeing the purchase contract?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, page 3, page 4. So we're starting on page 5 with the affidavit of disclosure. Now, last time I did this class, I had to actually look up what the affidavit of disclosure actually was, because I'm like, what in the heck is an affidavit of disclosure? So if the premises are located in an unincorporated area of the county and 5 or fewer parcels of property other than a subdivided property are being transferred, seller shall deliver a completed affidavit of disclosure in the form required by law to buyer within 5 days of the contract acceptance. Buyer shall provide notice of any affidavit of disclosure items disapproved within the inspection period or 5 days after the receipt of the affidavit of disclosure, whichever is later. So affidavit of disclosure is kind of like the what's the other term I'm thinking of when it's
Public
over 5,
report?
when it's 6 or more? It's what?
Public report?
Yeah, public report. So yeah, it's kind of like doing it's like a minor version of a public report is what the affidavit of disclosure is. So if you've got 6 or more units that you're selling, then you have to do a public report. If it's less than that, it's an affidavit of disclosure, which is just kind of just giving basic information about the property, more or less. Any questions about the affidavit? All right. So changes during escrow. Seller shall immediately notify buyer of any changes in the premises or disclosures made herein in the spuds or otherwise. Such notice shall be considered an update of the spuds, unless seller is already obligated by this contract or any amendments hereto to correct or repair the changed items disclosed. Buyer shall be allowed 5 days after such delivery of notice to provide notice of disapproval to seller. So this is one of those items that, and I'm trying to remember, it was because I talked to Charlie about this not that long ago. Were you guys in on that conversation with Charlie?
No, but we talked about this. Remember that this is one way. Yeah, we talked about this being one way to get out of the contract after.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually had a conversation with Charlie about this exact piece of the contract, and in the one that he used, it was there was actually something that had happened to the property, and I don't remember what it was, but there was some kind of damage or something that had happened. So they asked them to update the spuds, and they did. So when they updated the spuds, that gave the buyer that 5-day window to be able to get back out. But if there have been no changes in the property, then they don't have to update the spuds. They can always refuse to update the spuds. So if they refuse to update the spuds, you really don't have any recourse. Warranties. Condition and premises. Buyer and seller agree the premises are being sold in its present physical condition as of the date of the contract acceptance. Seller makes no warranty to buyer, either expressed or implied, as to the condition, zoning, or fitness of any particular use or purpose of the premises. However, seller shall maintain and repair the premises so that at the earlier of possession or close of escrow, the premises, including all personal property included in the sale, will be substantially in the same condition as on the date of the contract acceptance. And 2, all personal property not included in the sale and debris will be removed from the premises. Buyer is advised to conduct an independent inspection and investigations regarding the premises within the inspection period as specified in section 6A. Buyer and seller acknowledge and understand that they may, but are not obligated to engage in negotiations for repairs and improvements in the premises. Any/all agreed upon repairs improvements shall be addressed pursuant to section 6J. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack in this one paragraph here. The first part of it is the fact that they're buying the property as is. And that was something that, with this changed a couple of years ago when they made that change to the purchase contract and went to this version, which says as is rather than as is with warranted items. And that warranted items feature of the contract there were so many lawsuits and so many issues over that as to what was warranted, what wasn't warranted, what was covered, what wasn't covered, I think that was one of the main reasons why they just removed that whole section from it and just went to going, it's as is. You're buying the property in the condition that it is. If it changes before close of escrow, that's something different. But if there are no changes, you're buying it as is.
Sorry, so Todd, when you're talking about changes, those would include like acts of God, right? Like,
Right.
Like Murphy's Law, if something's going to go wrong, it will go wrong within that period,
Right.
which could be a rainstorm, which causes a leak in the roof, or a flood, or, some other kind of
or a fire,
destruction.
or water heater blows up, and anything of that nature that changes the condition of the house. Yeah, those are things that would need to be disclosed, and that's what that's referring to there.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And then the other piece of this, when it goes to all personal item properties, all personal property included in the sale will be in the same condition as well. So if you have personal property that you're including, like the refrigerator is considered personal property, or things along that nature, or an above ground spa, those kind of things, if those are included in the contract, they need to be in the same condition they were at the time you wrote the contract. So if the spa breaks down, seller's got to fix the spa before close of escrow. So these are some things that as a buyer, you can cure your seller on. So if you get to close of escrow and it's not in the same condition, or if they've got junk all over the property, if they've got debris and garbage and the rest of their personal property not included in the sale or still on the property, your buyer can cure the seller to get that stuff removed. And at that point, they can refuse to close escrow until the cure is satisfied.
So if the water heater leaks and causes damage,
yep,
all of that would be covered in this clause.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, if the water heater leaks and causes damage, and if the seller can't get it fixed before close of escrow, then either something is going to need to be done on that point. Is first of all, they're going to need to update the spuds. Second of all, they're going to probably have to do a credit of some kind. And if they do a credit, then that's fine. Or if they do a seller holdback, where they're going to hold back money to be paid to the contractor when the work is completed, that's another option. But I can tell you that title companies hate doing seller holdbacks. There are a lot of title companies that won't do it. They won't hang on to the money. But there are some title companies out there that will allow you to do a seller holdback.
Hey, Todd, I thought that if there was a dispute at the end, even though you send the cure notice, that your only recourse was really small claims court, not to call off the closing.
That's on repairs. You can't refuse on like bins or repairs. You can't refuse to close on bins or repairs. So if they didn't do repairs, if they didn't do bins or repairs, that kind of thing, then that you still have to close escrow. You still have to perform.
So this is only if something happens that you didn't know about.
Correct.
Because I had a dispute over a cracked mirror that was part of the wall. And I talked to Charlie about it, and I talked to lots of people. I think Patty even helped me on that one. And we were told we had to just close, which we did. But,
yeah.
But it wasn't we didn't even know about it.
Right.
It never disclosed to us and all that.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, the seller is still going to be able to cure you if you don't close, because they're going to now cure you because you didn't perform. But they're going to have to give you a 3-day cure notice. So if your cure notice is in place first, if they don't perform, you have the ability at that point to cancel. If your cure period notice runs out before their cure period notice runs out, your buyer is able to cancel and do whatever they have to do at that point. But if they then cure and you're under cure, now you've got to satisfy that cure and actually get closed before that date. So you want to pay close attention to those things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you need to make sure you know what your end game plan is, because in this market, a buyer curing and their only option to cancel, that may not be the best option.
Right. Yeah. Now you got to go back out on the market and try to find another house. And good luck getting it for the same price that you just got that one for.
Right. So, I mean, in all honesty, some sellers are like, yeah, so what? Cure me. I got buyers in line for
right.
money.
So at that point, yeah, you're probably your buyer's best recourse is to close, but then post close of escrow, then, serve notice to the seller of, I would serve it ahead of time, but then, after close of escrow, then they may have to go through either a small claims court or through superior court, depending on what the breach
What the
actually
issue
is, how
is.
much it was.
Okay.
So Todd, this includes everything on the property within the house and outside.
Correct.
If the irrigation breaks, if there's burst pipes outside,
Correct.
all those issues are covered.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, the seller warrants that they are going to have the house in materially that it's essentially the same condition as the date that they that the buyer put the contract on the property. So if that was broken before, if the irrigation system was broken before they wrote the contract on it, then the seller is not obligated to fix it before close of escrow, because it was there beforehand, and the seller or the buyer should have caught that at home inspection or during inspection period or something along those lines.
And for instance, hold it, I'm hearing feedback.
You're logged in
Hold it.
twice. I don't know why.
I am, because, wait, I'm gonna come right back. Sorry, I gotta come back.
Typically, these things happen, with the older houses, 20 years plus,
Yeah.
where they put in defective pipes and whatever, and they start acting up and flooding the yard or something
Yeah.
crazy. And it happens only, when, you sign the contract. So,
Well, and I don't know if it was you or somebody mentioned it earlier, Murphy's Law. I mean, the thing can be, everything can work perfectly fine until you put it under contract, and then all of a sudden something's going to break down. That's just kind of the nature of how things act.
So what I was going to say is I had a client, and this happened actually a couple times to me, where, the house was vacant and somebody went and stole the pool cleaner. And, my client calls up and says, the pool cleaner is stolen. Do I have to replace it? I said, absolutely, you have to replace it, And so, and in fact, I just took down a sign on a vacant house that it's closing in 2 weeks because of that exact same, because they moved out and I didn't want that to happen to them.
Right. And here's something that maybe, we've got a lot of people in here with a lot of experience on this, and, maybe you guys can shed a little bit of light on it. Is, so if you have something where, let's say you have the water heater blow up and you've got to have repairs done, or like Patty said, if the pool cleaner gets stolen and you file an insurance claim, now your insurance claims notice has changed from the clue report that you supplied. So do you have to change and update your clue as well? Is that something that needs to be disclosed and given to the buyer? I'm seeing a lot of nodding.
Well, yeah, you definitely, yes, I would definitely say that you have to, but
Yeah, I don't see the clue as being something in here that has to be updated. That's why I was kind of curious about that.
Did we get to that yet?
Let's see. Insurance claims report. I don't remember seeing anything. Insurance claims history.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah. 1%. If unavailable, the seller within 5 days after contract acceptance, buyer shall provide notice of any disapproved items within the inspection period or 5 days after receipt of the claims history, whichever is later. But it doesn't say anything about updating your clue report. So,
Todd, though, if something got stolen, okay, and if there was a theft at the house, that seems to me that that's a material fact that needs to be disclosed.
but you don't need to disclose crimes on a property.
I agree. No disclosing of crimes.
Well, I would say if there was damage, then you'd have to update the spuds.
Well, that's
If there was
if there's damage, yeah.
An insurance claim,
Right, so-
and an insurance claim, then you'd have to update the spuds, though.
Yeah, I'm thinking that is a material fact. And
Yeah.
so a material fact would have to be disclosed. I think that's a disclosure issue, that whether it's on if it's on the spuds, and I'd have to go back and take a look at the spuds and see if that is on there if there is a section in the SPUDs that says have there been any claims on the property. I mean, I know you've got to supply it, but I don't remember if that's in the SPUDs or not.
But hold on, not everything is a SPUDS item. I
No.
mean, this is, okay, this really happened. This is crazy. Had the listing and the front door was stolen. 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah, no, seriously, 2 days before. So somebody called me because they saw my sign and they said, hey, just wanted to let you know, somebody just walked off your front door. And I couldn't believe it, but it really did happen. So, but your front door being replaced is not a SPUDS item. So we put a new door in and we did not disclose that someone came and took the front door and we had to put a new one in.
Did you file an insurance claim?
No.
Okay. So yeah, that's, I don't think, that's not a material fact. I think that, I mean, you just replaced a door. So
Yeah.
that's.
And if
that I
the
don't
house
think-
has a security system,
Huh?
and if the house has got a security system and the buyer, I mean, one of the things that they look at is the security of the house. And that was, stolen and it didn't trigger the alarm or the security system. I mean, surely that should be divulged.
Yeah. So we use the Simply Safe, and Simply Safe also called and said, you have a trigger.
Your door's gone.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But obviously Simply Safe didn't know it was because the door was missing.
Yeah.
But nothing.
But I think that may be
That's
something
really
that maybe we need to get some clarification on, is if you file an insurance claim after the inspection period is over, after you've already supplied your clue report, if you file a claim on the property after that, does that need to be disclosed? I would say it does, but I don't have the legality purpose of it because it's not really in the contract. But at that
Yeah.
point, so if you have to disclose that, does the buyer have another 5 days at that point to review the new claims and decide if they want to continue?
I mean, I almost think that you do have to disclaim, you would have to disclose a insurance claim because it could affect the ability to get insurance from the new buyer.
Yeah.
Or I
would
mean,
think so too. I think that's a material thing that I would have to be disclosed. And at that point, then yes, in my opinion, you'd have to have another 5 days. The buyer would have to have 5 days then to review and decide if they wanted to continue.
yeah, but I always recommend never filing a claim during the escrow.
When you're in the escrow period.
Just don't do it.
All right, so let's see, we're on page 5. We got through, we're to warranties that survive closing. Okay, seller warrants that the seller has disclosed to buyer and broker all material latent defects and any information concerning the premises known to seller, excluding opinions of value which materially and adversely affect the consideration to be paid by buyer prior to close of escrow. Seller warrants that payment in full will have been made for all labor, professional services, materials, machinery, fixtures, or tools furnished within the 150 days immediately preceding close of escrow in connection with the construction, alteration, or repair of any structure or improvement to the premises. Seller warrants that the information regarding connection to the sewer system or on-site wastewater treatment facility, conventional septic or alternative, is correct and to the best of the seller's knowledge. So those are some good disclosures there that they're saying that you have to disclose things that are material, latent defects, that kind of stuff. Kind of the funny thing about this one, and this just happened to me, the house that I just sold down in Mesa, she had a new water softener put in, and she had a new air conditioner put in 2017 or 18, one or the other. But there was still an outstanding balance on both of those items that did not show up as liens on the property. So when we went to close, she got paid the full amount. Those were still outstanding balances that if she wanted to and walked away from them, I mean, the company that installed the air conditioning and the HVAC system, I mean, they could go after her, but she doesn't own the house anymore. So, I mean, what are they going to do? The only thing they could do would be to sue and go after her if that's what they
She had a payment plan, Todd?
Yeah.
So she has to sign a document, and I can't remember exactly what it says, but with the title company when she sells that, she has,
Right.
there are no outstanding debts, liens against the property or
Right.
liens against property. So I would think that she would be obligated under that to
this lady is like one of the most honest people you'll ever run across. So she absolutely was, she paid him off immediately when she got her funds. She just paid everything off in full. But I mean, it was one of those things where, I can't believe that the HVAC company didn't have a mechanic's lien against the property.
A UCC filing anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
Just like a solar company does,
Right.
So that's interesting. So the other thing I was going to mention, let's see, I mean, it just goes to show how, there are people that like, I knew somebody that used to routinely, and this is a longtime experienced agent, routinely sit at the table with the clients, because a lot of them were elderly, and she used to fill out the spuds for them. And one time I happened to see it, and I said, you must be out of your mind to touch those spuds in any way, shape, or form.
Yep.
And then I told her about the story about the agent in Florida, where there was a sinkhole underneath like one of the bedrooms, and the sellers knew it. Okay, they knew it, and the buyer closes, and then the buyer finds out about the sinkhole underneath, and the sellers, of course, everybody wants to throw the agent under the bus, and said, oh, we told the agent about it. She filled out the spuds, and she, it was her choice not to include it.
Wow.
And I said, you never, ever, ever touch spuds, period.
Yeah, I can't believe that she did that. I know who you're talking about. Yeah, and I can't believe that but she used to do it all the time. Crazy.
Yeah.
All right, buyer warranties. Buyer warrants that the buyer has disclosed to seller any information that may material and adversely affect the buyer's ability to close escrow or complete the obligations of the contract at the earlier of possession of the premises or close of escrow. Buyer warrants to seller the buyer has conducted and all desired independent inspections and investigations and accepts the premises. Buyer warrants the buyer is not relying on any verbal representations concerning the premises except disclosed as follows. Verbal's not going to hold up anyway. Even if you have something written down there, it's not going to, it's going to be verbal. And unless when it's on here, it becomes written. And if the seller agrees to it, then of course it becomes a written agreement. Inspection period. Inspection period shall be 10 days or blank after the contract acceptance. During the inspection period, at the buyer's expense, they shall 1, conduct all desired physical, environmental, and other types of inspections and investigations to determine the value and condition of the premises. 2, make inquiries and consult government agencies, lenders, insurance agents, architects, and other appropriate persons and entities concerning the suitability of the premises and the surrounding area. 3, investigate applicable building, zoning, fire, health, and safety codes to determine any potential hazards, violations, or defects in the premises. And 4, verify any material multiple listing service information. If the presence of sex offenders in the vicinity or the occurrence of a disease, natural death, suicide, homicide, or other crime on or in the vicinity is material to the buyer, it must be investigated by the buyer during the inspection period. Buyer shall keep premises free of all and clear of all liens, shall indemnify and hold seller harmless from all liability claims, demands, damages, and costs, and shall repair all damages arising from the inspections. Buyer shall provide seller and brokers upon receipt at no cost copies of all inspection reports concerning the premises obtained by the buyer. Buyer is advised to consult the Arizona Department of Real Estate Buyer Advisory to assist in buyer's due diligence inspections and investigations. Now there's a ton of information in that paragraph right there. There's a ton of stuff in there that you can kind of unpack and go through. First part is the 10 days or blank days. You can always ask for more, or you can go with less days for your inspection period. Currently, we're seeing people that are going with less days. You want to make sure that if you're doing that your inspector can get out and take their look at the house and make sure that you can get all of your inspections done and your bins are prepared in the amount of time that you have in there. We're seeing people that are, waiving their inspection period. I would never advise to do that. You can waive your right to ask for repairs. And if you want to waive your right to ask for repairs or concessions, that's perfectly up to your buyer. If they're comfortable, getting the property as is, then, that's something that they can do, but they need to understand the risk of, really taking away that. But even if they do say that they are not going to ask for repairs, does that mean that you can't submit a Binzer?
No.
Correct. I just did it.
Definitely. It
I
happens
just
all the
did it
time.
last night.
And what happened? Just last night. Oh, okay, you don't know yet.
But no, I know what happened. I am a huge believer in communication. So I am communicating with the other agent, through the whole process and getting through the whole inspection period. And our inspection period ended yesterday. So we had to have the Binzer submitted by last night. So we're waiting for a pool inspection to come back. The pool inspection finally comes back in. The inspector called her in the afternoon and said, yeah, there is a ton of stuff wrong with this pool, to the tune of $10,000 to $15,000 to get this to the point where you want it. And so, of course, the seller or the buyers are a little taken aback by how much there is that needs to be done. So we're waiting for the inspection report from the pool to come back so I can supply that to the seller and show them these are all the things that are wrong with the pool. So in the meantime, I'm communicating back and forth between the parties, and the buyers are like, well, we want them to pay for at least half of what the repairs are going to be. I'm like, okay, but you understand that we have said that we were going to buy the property as is. And they're like, well, we understand that, but we didn't know there was going to be, $10,000 to $15,000 worth of pool repairs. We never would have offered that much money had we known that that was the case. I said, well, if you had not offered that much money, we wouldn't be in this position right now. So
We wouldn't be, but yeah, you wouldn't be the buyers of this property, right?
correct.
Yeah.
So that's what I was getting across to them. It's like, there's this market, and they understand the market. They were here. They see what it's like. So they understand just how, what the situation is. And so we went back and forth, finally got the inspection report about 9:00 last night. So I was able to look at the report, and I discerned from the report that there were probably about $3,000 worth of repairs that needed to be done. There was about 8 to 10, maybe $12,000 worth of things that if you really wanted the pool to be one that you would know, set it and forget it type of thing, you wouldn't have to worry about it, then yeah, you would need to do these other things that were on that list. So, I sent it over to the seller's agent. The seller's agent looked at it and said, there's not $10,000 to $12,000 or $10,000 to $15,000 on here. She said, we can get those repairs done for about $1,000. I'm like, well, if you can get it done for $1,000, that'd be a miracle as far as I'm concerned. I said, I see more than that. But so I went back to my client, and the seller's agent said, my seller will give him $500. I said, okay, that's probably not going to work, but I'll go ask. So I went back to my clients and said, they'll give you $500. And they were like, absolutely not. We want half. And I said, if you ask for half, they're going to turn it down. And then you're going to have to figure out whether you want to cancel or whether you want to continue.
You'll have nothing, right?
We went back and forth. And finally they were like, you know what? We'll take her $500 and she can have a nice life. I'm like, okay. So I submitted the Binzer back that asked for this list of repairs to be done, because that's what I needed to do in order to be able to get an addendum signed stating that they were going to give a $500 credit. So I sent that over last night. They signed off on the Binzer and said that they did what they weren't supposed to and what I told her not to do. She put that they were going to give a $500 credit as the seller's response on the Binzer. And they also gave me an addendum that said they were giving $500. So I just accepted it, sent it over, and I said, just accept it. This is not the correct way to do it, but just accept it so that we can move on. We know there's going to be a $500 credit. We'll send that to title, and you're going to get a $500 credit at closing. So
Wait, let's talk about that a second.
Yep.
What did you want them to do with respect to the seller response?
To sign it and said that they accepted it. They're accepting the seller's response of the $500 credit.
No, the seller. You said I didn't want the seller to mention that they were given a $500 credit on the
Binzer. On the
Binzer.
No.
What did you want them to do?
Say that they weren't going to make any repairs and give me the addendum, saying that they were unwilling to make any repairs, and also give me the addendum at the same time for the $500.
Yeah.
Can't the Binzer have that information just as long as the addendum does not?
Technically, yeah, but we would just rather not have money on the Binzer at all. We would rather just have that addressed in an addendum where it's supposed to be. And just on the Binzer, it's cut and dried. There's 3 options on the Binzer. You either accept the property, you ask for repairs, or you cancel. So that's the buyer's, that's their option. The seller's response is technically supposed to be either we'll make the repairs, we'll make part of the repairs, or we're making no repairs. That's really what the response is supposed to be. So it can get convoluted if you start saying, well, we're going to give you a $500 credit here. So now you've got a $500 credit on the Binzer, but you've also got a $500 addendum. So the seller or the buyer might be confused saying, well, they're going to give me $500 here and they're doing an addendum for $500. So we're getting $1,000.
But no, I always say seller to credit buyer $500 toward closing costs as evidenced by addendum number 1 to the contract.
Yeah.
I
Period.
do that too, but sometimes it happens where we do fix some things and those
Yes.
items that we don't fix, we have the credit.
Right.
So like we fix items 1, 3, and 5, but 2, 4, and 6, we're like, no, here's $1,000.
Yeah.
So
And that's exactly, Sherry, that's exactly what I just did. You know, we gave a, you know, we were fixing just a couple items, and then all the other, in lieu of all other repairs, we were giving $2,500. So and then I just put as evidenced by addendum number 1 to the contract.
exactly. And then
Yeah, I
on addendum
just
number
would-
1, you don't talk about the Binzer at all.
As a broker,
Right.
I would just rather see just what you're going to repair and what you're not going to repair on the Binzer, and use an addendum to do what you're going to do monetarily.
How about, Todd, in the case of appliances like HVAC units, where after inspection, it's basically, they're saying, look, this HVAC unit has done its life and it needs to be replaced. In cases of that nature, how would you settle that? Where they're actually saying, you can't even use this unit any longer.
You would actually, in your Binzer, you would ask them to replace it.
Oh, okay.
But if it's functional, if it's working and functional, you really can't ask somebody, even if it's past its useful life, if it's functioning properly. If I'm a seller, I'm not replacing that. It's still working. I'm not going to replace it.
If it's past its due date by 5, 6, 7, 8 years,
Yep.
you can't get it replaced.
You can ask, but if I'm the seller, I'm not going to do that. If it's working properly, why am I going to fix it? I'm not going to spend the money to give you a new unit because you want a new air conditioning unit just because it's useful life. You say it's 10 years. I've seen HVAC systems that were 40 years old and working properly. I've seen water heaters that were 40 years old and working properly. And they say a water heater's useful life is what, 10 to 12 years?
Yeah.
But this one was 40 years old and still functioning perfectly fine. And
Wow.
there was no reason to replace it because it was still working great. So just because its recommended date has passed doesn't mean that, the seller is going to be obligated to replace it with something else.
Right. Got it.
All right. So we've gotten through that whole piece right there. There's a lot more that we could get into even more with it, but we're going to kind of keep moving on here because we're only got about 20 minutes left and we're just almost through.
Hey, Todd, I hate to ask, but can
Yep.
I go back to the very, very, very beginning? So
Yep.
you had said, you guys were talking about the spuds and updating them. So as a listing agent, if the buyer's agent asks you to update the spuds, you have the right, it sounded like, to say, no, we're not going to?
If there have been no material changes in the property, yeah, you really have no responsibility to update the spuds.
So
But, so let's just say that you, the property is the condition that it's in. The buyer has a home inspection. The home inspection reveals that, hey, you've got some loose tiles on the roof and it's ruined some underlayment that's going to need to be replaced. There are some other things that are on that inspection report. You've now submitted that to the seller. The seller is now aware of those, but he is not required to go in and update the spuds based on that. They're not required to. You can ask them to.
So it sounds like as a listing agent, we better communicate with you or Charlie or somebody if we're getting a request to update spuds.
Yeah, I would really get an opinion of the broker whether or not your seller should update your spuds and give it back. Because what you're doing is you're putting the ball back in that buyer's court to be able to cancel if they want. If they're
Okay.
past their inspections, and they may just be looking for another out. And
Right.
our responsibility is really to keep them from having all those outs. So yeah, I would check with Charlie or myself, and more than likely it's going to go to Charlie because it's his listing. He's the one that's going to have the final say on it.
Okay, thanks. I just want a clarification on that.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so we are on square footage. Buyer is aware that any reference to the square footage on the premises, both the real property, land, and improvements as approximate of square footage is material fact matter to the buyer. It must be investigated during the inspection period. We just had an internal issue with one of these just not very long ago where when it came after the appraisal was done, the appraiser came up with a different square footage than what was represented in the MLS. And the buyer now wanted to change their offer based on the square footage that the appraisal came in at. And it didn't happen until right up towards close of escrow. So, I mean, we were outside of inspection period, all that kind of stuff. And it just got stupid. And it was like, okay, it's in the contract. If that's a material thing, it needs to be checked out during your inspection period, not by an appraiser, 4 days before close of escrow. So if it's a material fact for your buyer, they need to do it during the inspection period. Wood destroying.
So what happened?
They closed.
Hmm.
They closed, and I don't remember whether or not our agent gave the buyer a little bit of money just to be quiet and go away. I don't think they did. I think they just said either you take it or we're going to put it back on the market again and resell it. So they ended up closing, but they weren't happy. Wood destroying organism or insect inspection. If current or past wood destroying organisms or insects such as termites are material to the buyer, these issues must be investigated during the inspection period. Buyer shall order and pay for all wood destroying organisms or insect inspections performed during the inspection period. If lender requires an updated wood destroying organism or insect inspection report prior to close of escrow, will be performed at buyer's expense. So if they find termites and they have to have it treated and you have to have somebody go back out again, that's going to be at buyer's expense, not the seller's expense. Real quick, I want to back up real quick back into that paragraph up above again, where it says the buyer shall keep the premises free and clear of all liens and indemnify the seller harmless from all liability claims, blah, 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 and shall repair all damages arising from the inspections. So if your home inspector goes on the property, if they cause damage, if they're in the attic and they step through the ceiling and put a hole in the ceiling of the house, guess who's on the hook for that? That's why you want a licensed and bonded inspector, because they're going to be on the hook instead of the buyer. But technically it's the buyer, because the contract states that any damage caused during an inspection is going to have to be repaired by the buyer. So just another little piece.
So we had a deal with on a home where the home inspector comes in, does the inspection, and after the fact, the seller claimed that the inspector, did damage. I mean, I'm sure it's happened to all of you. It's happened to me, several times. But in this particular one, she had just remodeled the house and claimed that there were, that the inspector had gouged the countertops, her marble countertops. And so the interesting thing, though, is when we pointed out to her, there were these gouges. Now she obviously didn't see it when they were installed, but they were in a number of different places, like where the home inspector was nowhere near it, So, I mean, at least we were able to prove that he didn't do it, I mean, he wasn't anywhere near the, that, but that happens all the time where they claim that the inspector damaged the property.
Yep. Yeah, that is something that you will definitely run across if you're in the business. If you're fortunate to be in it long enough, you definitely will run across it. All right, flood hazard. Flood hazard designations or the cost of flood hazard insurance shall be determined by the buyer during the inspection period. If the premises are situated in an area identified as having any special flood hazards by the government entity, the lender may require the purchase of flood hazard insurance. Special flood hazards may also affect the ability to encumber or improve the premises. So if there are flood hazards on the property, maybe they're not able to put on the pool in the backyard or add the garage or whatever they want to do. These are all things that need to be discovered while you're in your inspection period. the best way to discover that is to have your buyer contact their insurance person and give them a cost as to what it's going to cost, and see if they're going to have flood hazard insurance or anything like that on the property. See if there are any hazards, if there is anything that has been applied to that property.
And I haven't had this in a while, but at one point, flood insurance can be very expensive, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's a lot cheaper if you can assume or transfer the existing policy that the seller has to the new buyer. Sometimes a lot cheaper if you can have that done.
Well,
I
that's
don't
a
know
good point. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, so go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, good. No, that's great. That's great info. All right, insurance. If the homeowner's insurance is a material matter to the buyer shall apply for and obtain written information on the availability and cost of homeowner's insurance for the premises from buyer's insurance company during the inspection period. That's what I pretty much just said. Buyer understands that any homeowner's fire, casualty, flood, and other insurance desired by the buyer or required by lender should be in place at close of escrow. And I can pretty much guarantee you that if you have a loan, it will be in place, or you will not get your funding. It will not come through.
But it's really important to tell your seller, if it's a cash deal, make sure that they have reached out to get insurance on the property, because a lot of times they're not thinking about that, or they
Right.
they haven't focused on that.
Right.
And sometimes and I know I've said this before. I had a cash buyer on a property in Clearwater Hills. They had a number of policies. They had through their business and everything. And 3 days before close of escrow, they reached out to their insurance company to get the insurance on this property, and the insurance company refused. It was Farmers, I think it was, and this guy was irate because he had all these policies with him, and he says, "What do you mean?" And in the spuds and in the insurance claims history, they had several claims for roof leaks and water damage, and so he finally ended up getting the insurance company to agree to cover the property for everything except damage from roof leaks, which they said that they would take off once he had the roof replaced. So, very important to get cash buyers to get that straightened out well in advance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, this next section, sewer and on-site wastewater treatment system. The premises are connected to a sewer system, a conventional septic system, or an alternative system. Does anybody have any experience with what an alternative system might be? Carolyn, don't tell me an outhouse.
No, it's like rocks. It kind of goes through some rocks and stuff like that. So it can be different things.
Yeah, I have never seen an alternative system. It's either a sewer or conventional septic. Yeah, I haven't seen anything, but if it's not a conventional septic, I guess if it's an alternative septic system, if there's some kind of a other natural filter way that they're filtering it, I guess that would be an alternative. I've never had experience with it.
We had that on Hummingbird, Brooke and I, with that listing of his grandparents. So I learned a lot about that.
So was it a septic, Sherry?
So it was a septic, but it failed the septic test. And so then we were trying to figure out different things. And the septic company was saying, based on being on the hillside, that really needed an alternative system. And so we got to find out more about that. The irony of the whole thing is that we ended up, and I represented both sides, but nobody did anything with the septic, even though it didn't pass, and it still was able to change hands to the new buyer, who was an investor buyer.
Wow.
And it was fine. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm assuming that because there probably wasn't a loan on it, that's how it was able to go through without it.
Yep, all cash. Yeah.
I thought the whole point of that was that it had to be certified off so that it could transfer ownership through the county.
No, I literally have talked to the county so many times about this. So it turns out that they don't care. They'll transfer. You just have to do all the paperwork and stuff like that. But it just needs to be, certified, and it has to have the test, but it doesn't necessarily have to pass.
Interesting. That's interesting.
A loan involved in a whole other animal.
Oh, yeah, yeah. The lender, there's no way if they didn't have that certificate, I'm sure the lender would never fund the property.
Yeah.
Huh.
So I actually had a seller in PV, and he was in a house. I think the house was like, it wasn't old, 3 or 4 years old. And when he filled out the spuds, he said that the home was on a sewer system, was connected to sewer. And I can't remember how I knew this, but I said, are you sure? Because I'm pretty sure your house is on septic. And and he was a doctor. He had no idea that it was on septic.
How long had he lived
And,
there?
He lived there like 4 years at least, 3 or 4 years. Bought it brand new.
Wow.
Did not know it was on septic. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that's, and you just never know. I mean, it doesn't matter what part of town you're in. There are septic systems all throughout the established part of Phoenix. So you would think that you would be on sewer, but it may be on septic.
Absolutely. And the house right behind him actually was on sewer, but he wasn't. So, at the time, the builder got away with not connecting it because it was, if it's within a certain range, when you're building a new build, if it's within a certain range of a septic, you have to, a sewer, you have to connect. But if it's not, then you have a pass on it. You could put in septic. But go ahead. Sorry.
Crazy. No, that's amazing. All right. Sewer connection material to the buyer must be investigated during the inspection period. If the premises is served by a conventional septic or alternative system, the AAR on-site wastewater treatment facility addendum is incorporated herein by reference. So if you did not check that box on the front page, that is your saving piece right there, that it is incorporated by that piece right there. But you should have that box checked on page 1 that addendum is also part of the contract. Swimming pool barrier regulations. During the inspection period, buyer agrees to investigate all applicable state, county, and municipal swimming pool barrier regulations and agrees to comply and pay all costs of compliance with said regulations prior to occupying the premises, unless otherwise agreed in writing. If premises contains a swimming pool, buyer acknowledges receipt of the Arizona Department of Health Services approved pool safety notice. So that nowhere in there does it say that the seller has to bring it up to code. It just says that the buyer is going to do their due diligence and look at it. And if it needs to be brought up to code, that they're going to be the one that's going to have to put it up to code, unless you have something in writing that says that they are going to do it.
Todd, I take that one an extra step sometimes, and I actually have the buyer sign the bottom of the notice from the state.
The pool notice, the pool
Yeah.
safety notice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do the same
Not a bad
thing,
idea.
Carolyn. That's
Yep.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Proves
that
that
way
they've
you know
seen it.
for sure it gets done.
Yep.
I added it to my checklist last year, but I caught
That's, I'm glad you guys reminded me of that. I need to get a copy of that to my clients who just had the pool that we did the thing on yesterday. I haven't got that done, so I'm going to throw that in there. All right. Buyer acknowledges and recognizes and agrees that brokers are not qualified nor licensed to conduct due diligence with respect to the premise or surrounding area. If buyer is instructed to consult with qualified licensed professionals to assist in buyer's due diligence efforts, because conducting due diligence with respect to the premises and the surrounding area is beyond the scope of the broker's expertise and licensing, buyer expressly releases and holds harmless brokers from liability for any defects or conditions that could have been discovered by inspection or investigation.
My
So
favorite paragraph.
Yep, we are not qualified. That is beyond our scope of expertise to do inspections for people.
When I'm reading that paragraph to buyers, I always stop right there after the qualified. I just say buyers are not qualified, period. And
Yep.
then I get a great laugh out of it. And it
Yep.
works really
The
well.
buyer recognizes and agrees that the brokers are not qualified.
Period.
We're done. That's all you need to say right there. We're not qualified to do inspections. You're on your own from that. And I just had an agent just today that has gone through they're in a situation where the buyer is asking them their opinion on the cracked tiles in the floor in the house. There are a lot of cracked tiles in the floor. Asked him his opinion on whether or not there is a foundation problem. And what they want is for our agent to tell them, oh yeah, that's just normal cracking. And I said, you need to get it in writing that they are okay with going forward without having that inspected. They're not relying on your word for this because you are not qualified to give them that advice. He's like, okay, I'll make sure I do that. But it's the home inspector was Advantage Home Inspection, and Advantage in their home inspection said that it is routine cracking in the flooring and the tiles. But there are 32 cracked tiles. That's a lot of cracked tiles in a house.
Wow.
So in my opinion, in my own personal opinion, that's not normal. That's not normal routine cracking if you have 32 cracked tiles. And I said, point them to the map, the Maricopa County map of expansive soil.
Yeah.
And sure enough, this falls in that expansive soil in one of those areas that's designated as expansive soil. So I think the buyer's still going to go through with it, but it's not going to be because we didn't warn them. All right, inspection period notice. Prior to the inspection, yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
One of the other things I cautioned one of our agents on the other day was the buyer was, well, how much do you think it'll cost to redo the cabinets? How much do you think it'll cost to redo the tile? And I said, do not be answering those questions. You don't know. You know,
Nope.
he might, you know, you could do a kitchen for 5,000, but you could also do a kitchen for 50,000, and you
Yep.
don't know what kind of kitchen they want. So
yeah,
careful on throwing those kind of numbers out there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so inspection period notice. Prior to the expiration of the inspection period, buyer shall deliver to seller a notice of signed any items disapproved. AAR's buyer inspection notice and seller's response form is available for this purpose. Buyer shall conduct all desired inspections and investigations prior to delivering such notice to the seller, and all inspection period items disapproved shall be provided in a single notice. So you can't provide a Binzer and then a couple days later provide something else and then keep going on down the line. Once you do your Binzer, your inspection period has effectively ended. Once you have sent that Binzer over to them, your inspection period has effectively ended at that point. Your due diligence period hasn't ended, but your inspection period has. Difference there.
Hey, so Todd, it says that the AAR form, the Binzer, is available for this purpose.
Yes.
If you send like an email and say, hey, these are the things we're looking at, I mean, could that be misconstrued as your Binzer?
Oh, good point.
It could. I mean, but if you're sending over, I mean, if you, yeah, I would be careful as to what you're sending over and how you're wording that. But I mean, if you're just sending over the inspection notice, like if you get an inspection done, and if you're sending the inspection the inspection over to the seller, which you should do right away once you get the inspection back, you are to provide that, according to what we had up there earlier, you are to
Right.
provide that to the seller's agent or to the seller right away when you get that inspection report back. You should always do that anyway, to get it over to them so that they can have a chance to digest it before you send your Binzer to them. But that's not going to be misconstrued as your inspection request. That's just a notification of this is what my inspector has found.
And to your point, if we're ever sending anything that's a question or there could be any, we always state in there, this does not and is not serving as our Binzer. I mean, if depending on what the circumstances are, we always put that language in just in case.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Good point. All right, so buyer disapproval. If buyer in buyer's sole discretion disapproves of items as allowed herein, buyer shall deliver to seller a signed notice of all the items disapproved and state in the notice that the buyer elects to either, one, immediately cancel the contract, in which case, if buyer's notice specifies disapproval of items as allowed herein, the earnest money shall be released to buyer. But if they just send the Binzer over and saying we're canceling without giving a reason, that does not mean they get their money back right away. That is not sufficient. You have to give them an actual reason. It has to be disapproved of items allowed, whatever that is. That's it. There's a whole array of things that could fall in there, but you can't just send over and say we're canceling and expect to get the earnest money.
I think, but the seller has to cure that non-disclosure, right?
It's going to be up to the probably the title company to decide that.
Mhm.
But I mean, technically they're really not canceling. I mean, just because you say I want to cancel, you have to give a reason. I mean, technically it's really not canceled unless if nobody calls you out on it, then yeah, I mean, it's done. Once it gets canceled and the money gets sent back, it's done. But technically you need to have a reason.
And I've seen some things, Todd, and I can't remember what they are, unfortunately, because I always make sure that I, reference it back. But where some people have canceled and gotten denied because they didn't put. I mean, generally, we always think you can cancel for anything, but I think there are some things that you can put in there that are not considered.
You can't cancel because the house is blue. The house was blue
Right.
when you put your offer on it. So you can't now cancel it because the house is blue. That's.
And you can't cancel if you've got multiple, if you're giving multiple offers and you say, oh, my other
Correct.
offer got accepted.
Right. That is not
Especially right now with the crazy buyer's market.
Yep, exactly. And that's one thing your buyers have to be very well aware of. If they're instructing you to throw out multiple offers, but you don't want to denote that you actually are throwing out multiple offers, then your buyer has to understand that you could lose your earnest money. You could be required to produce and forfeit earnest money if your offer is accepted and you try to cancel without a legitimate reason. All right. If buyer's notice fails to specify disapproved items allowed herein, the cancellation will remain in effect, but buyer has failed to comply with the provision of this contract, and seller may deliver buyer a cure notice as required by Section 7A. If buyer fails to cure their noncompliance within 3 days after such delivery notice, buyer shall be in breach and seller shall be entitled to earnest money. If prior to expiration of the cure period, buyer delivers notice specifying items disapproved as allowed herein, buyer shall get their earnest money back. So that's, Sherry, that was your point right there. Seller can cure them if they don't do it correctly and make them hold up the money. And then in 3 days, if they don't satisfy the cure, then they can take the earnest money.
I have to admit, I literally just read that like a week ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I never not put a response, I always put a reason, but I was trying to prove to my client that they need to put a reason.
Yeah.
And so I pointed it out. I'm like, holy crap, look at that extra paragraph.
Yeah. Every time we go through this purchase contract, there's something that always pops out. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that. Yeah, that's great. I mean, we've been through the contract, God knows how many times. But it seems like every time we go through it, that there's always something that's like, oh, geez, yeah, I didn't even think about it that way. Or, yeah, I didn't realize that was there kind of thing. All right, guys, I am going to stop here because it's now 2:02 and I have somebody else that I am supposed to be having a little meeting with here at 2 o'clock. So I'm going to stop it here and we will pick it up next week and I'm going to make a note that we are on line 270, 273? All right, line 273, page 7 of the purchase contract. So we're almost finished.
Thank you, Todd.
You bet. All right, guys, thank you all for coming and joining
Happy
in.
St. Patty's Day.
Say happy St. Patty's Day. I will talk to you all soon.
Happy. Bye. Bye.